Welcome back to a lifetime of Mafia tales. Sal shares a couple stories today about Tommy Desimone being very jealous of him. Sal details out a watch heist that he did with some other mobsters and Tommy not being invited. Tommy wasn't very happy about this. Mentioned in this heist story are John Gotti, Gene Gotti, Dominic Cataldo, Foxy, Big Funzy, and many more. Many people that follow the Mafia are familiar with who Tommy Desimone was. He was one of the main characters in the movie Goodfellas. Tommy was known for killing quite a few people, even people that weren't even criminals at all. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this. Also, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon if you want to get an exclusive story about Sal and Tommy Desimone. Good morning, Sal.
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good, man. How you doing this morning?
Good, good. I was, thinking about this watch robbery I did. God, it's like 50 years ago. I believe it was done in February of 1974, and there was things happening in those days. One of the elements of that robbery was there was a current gasoline shortage, and Foxy and I had to deal with that. But to set up the details of how we did the score, where the information came from, it's important that, I tell the story with all the great detail, which is Cataldo and Dominic Cataldo, the hitman, for the Columbus. He had previously robbed a whole truckload of watches. And I don't know exactly how, it wasn't the feds, but I don't know exactly how the Queens robbery squad found out. But what Cataldo and Funzy Terracone and Jack Donnelly did was they decided, Mike Corio was the attorney, to give back the merchandise so they wouldn't get busted. So they, Corio made an arrangement with some Queens robbery squad detectives to get a truckload of watches and place it a couple of blocks from the Queens courthouse, and then the robbery squad would get the watches, give them back, because the insurance company said, well, if we can get the watches back, we'll agree not to prosecute the guys, because they identified Funzy on the score because this guy was 6'6". Now, I don't know all the details because I wasn't privileged to know what they did in 1969. But what I do know, it was a fortune in watches. So what Cataldo and Donnelly and Funzy Terracone did is they pilfered through the watches and took maybe a couple thousand watches, were worth a lot of money then. But in 69, gold was cheap, so it wasn't really worth that much. I come along in 74 and I ask all these questions about the name of the company. And Terracone, Funzy, is real hot. He said, would you actually go inside the airport and stick up the terminal? Absolutely. I go, we can do it with Foxy. He said, okay. I go, well, we need another guy. So we meet with Gene Gotti. And we say, Gene, there's a big score in there, and come take a look. So he goes with us, Foxy and I, and Funzy Terracone, and we're clocking this building where the watches are sitting inside this building. And what we learned was that every week they would get a shipment of exotic watches from Switzerland, but they couldn't ship them to New York City to the jewelry district unless the customs officers went there, inspected them, and released them. So it was always like 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then customs would go in and they'd open up the watches and then they'd approve them and they would release the watches so that this company, which was called S&H Pomerantz, could transport it to New York City to the jewelry exchange. So I hadn't talked to John Gotti about it, but Gene went back and told John, oh, these guys have got a good score lined up. And John Gotti said, who's going to go? And he said, Sal Ubatz, Foxy, and Funzy Terracone and myself. We might need one more guy, and they're talking about bringing Tommy Desimone. Oh, when John Gotti heard that, he hated Desimone, okay? And then he told Gene, forget it, don't go. The excuse was that you're going to get killed inside the airport. But in those days, there was very little security, no cameras. So then once we realized Gene Gotti wouldn't go, we definitely needed another guy. And Funzy Terracone agreed for us to take a guy named Charlie Scotti. I don't remember exactly how we got Charlie Scotti to go. I'm not sure. Maybe I think John Gotti knew that Scotty was a tough guy. He had killed a lot of people. He was a drug dealer. He was older than all of us, and he got excited. He wanted to go do it. So we started watching, and I had plans. How I was going to do this. And Funzy, he didn't care. He's just let me know when we're going to do it. I'll go into the back of the truck with Charlie. You and Foxy drive through. We had to go through the security gate. And when we get in there, you guys make the approach. You go up to the front door, get in there, take over the whole crew of people, all the employees, and then I'll come in. And I had good information that there was a value room in there, a big value room that was locked up. And the high dollar watches were in this value room. We didn't know how many watches was in there, but we're going to do it. So we go and we get a truck. And then Foxy decides I can get paperwork like bill of lading so I can show the guard at the gate and he'll let us in. So Foxy gets his bill of lading from some secretary he knew. At the same time, like I told you, there was a gasoline shortage. Oh, and the other part was that we're going to drive that truck about 80 miles to the Hamptons, out to Long Island, and Jack Donnelly's brother-in-law or something's got this funeral parlor, and we're going to slip the watches down into the basement in the funeral parlor, which is a great place to drop the merchandise. So everything's all arranged, and Cataldo went back and told Gotti, look, Sal is real intent upon dividing the merchandise in 4 portions, and everybody will be responsible to sell their own portion, because I had gotten ripped off a few years earlier with the furloughed, because Gotti's 2 bosses, Charlie Fatico and his brother, they ripped us off. They gave us a terrible price. That was the one I did with Red. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we were gonna do that, and we did. We set it up to do it, and so we go to the security gate. Foxy shows the bill of lading that we were picking up merchandise, and the guy let us go in. Once we drove in there, it was like maybe a quarter of a mile in, big security fences. We backed up to the building. Foxy and I went to the front door and we knocked on the front door. A guy came to the door. We pushed him in. We went in and we got about 3 or 4 employees. We tied them up. We taped them up. Okay, so then when we opened up the back of the big truck and we opened up the garage door to the terminal, Charlie Scotti and Funzy get out of the truck, meet us in there, and we go to the back where this, fenced security area is. We get the keys off the employees. We open it up and we look in there, and there's boxes and boxes and boxes. Like we're talking about a big terminal. Now we get these flatbed hand trucks and we start loading them up. And we got to go maybe 80, 100 feet to get it into the truck. In the meantime, I stayed with the hostages for a few minutes, kept them quiet, cut the phones, And Big Funzy and Charlie and Foxy are loading up all these watches. And I realized that the watches that were in wooden boxes were the valuable ones. And there was hundreds and hundreds of cases, cardboard cases, that I didn't know exactly what was in there, but they were very heavy. And so for about 20, 30 minutes, they're loading that truck up. Now, being in a terminal, cargo terminal for 30 minutes at JFK is pretty risky. But what we did know is that we did it like at 8 o'clock in the morning, that customs was going to come in there about 9:30, quarter to 10. So we had a 45-minute drive. All we had to do was load that truck up and get out of Queens. Okay, so I come up with the idea that the front door had like several locks, key locks, and then it had like a hasp on the front where you could put a big heavy duty lock. I think in those days they call it American lock, like a silver lock on that door. And I said to Foxy, if we put this lock on there, when customs comes, they're not going to be able to get in and nobody's going to be able to get out. They're going to have to call somebody with a torch to cut it off. So we need extra time. Let's put this lock on there. So we do the heist and we drive out of there and we start to go to Long Island. And we're on the Long Island Expressway. And our gas, we made sure the gas tank was full because there was lines of gas at the gas stations in that month. We get out to the funeral parlor and we make the phone call to Jackie Donnelly. He calls I guess it was his brother-in-law. Guy opens up the back entrance, and then there's steps there. And we got to bring all the watches through the back entrance and slide it down the steps. In the meantime, there's a couple of dead bodies in coffins down there. So we had to be quiet. Now, this is like, say, maybe 10 o'clock by the time we got out there, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So we get all the watches inside. Then I think Charlie, Scotty, and Foxy, because we had to pick up a car too. They take the truck about 20, 30 miles away, dump it, they come back, and we're sorting all the watches, separating them all. Because remember, we've got to divide it up into 4 equal parts. So by the time we laid out all those watches, we discovered there was like 58,000 watches, okay? And maybe 70, 80% of them were cheap watches. They were like a couple of dollars each in those days. But the price of gold had gone, to a record high that particular month. Gold and silver went through the roof. And so as we're separating everything and lined it up, Foxy and Funzy, they were writing everything down. I already had it in my brain. I didn't even need to write it down. I knew there was 1,000 watches in each cardboard box. And I knew how many cardboard boxes we had. And then the wooden boxes had watches in like gift wrapped, like in a with exotic names like Audemars. These watches are 10,000 each today. Rado watches, Omega watches, and a lot of them are gold watches.
Damn.
So we're down there for days, and then we hear footsteps upstairs. Maybe in the afternoon, people were coming over to view. They must have had a funeral session, a viewing session, and then I think it was Foxy or maybe Funzy looked up, said, "What time is it?" I looked at them. I go, "I don't have a fucking watch."
And there's thousands of them just laying around.
58,000 watches.
58.
So we spent all day separating them. Okay, then we've got to go get a way to transport them back to Queens. So I said, look, I'm going to go rent a van, just a little U-Haul van, and you guys go and get whatever you want so you can transport your portion of the watches, which is like, it wouldn't fit in a car. You definitely have to have a Suburban or a van, So the next day we all decide to meet there. Of course, by this time, it hits the news and there's all kinds of news about this particular robbery, The next day we go back and everybody picks up their portion. And I take my watches back to across the street from the Sinatra Club, was my wife's grandfather. And I bury them down in his basement, cases and cases. And then I take like a watch of each style and I bring it over to the house. Well, those guys were so intent upon selling them right away. I don't know who Gotti got to buy Foxy's watches, and I don't know who Funzy got to buy his watches, but he he knew some people in the jewelry business, so he did that. And Charlie, I don't know exactly what Charlie did, but he picked up his, and we didn't see him for a while. He was, by the way, ready to go back to prison on a violation, Charlie Scotty. So he did take his watches and he stashed them. I didn't have much contact with him, but he was part of a popular family. His family was involved in pornography.
What family was he a part of? Was it a mom family?
He was connected to one of the families in Manhattan. I'm not sure. It might have been Salerno. But when I say his family, his relatives, and two of his nephews became famous. They were like original rappers. If you look up the Scotty brothers, they were very, very popular, and they got rich doing rap. But as far as how we sold that stuff, I gave Cataldo a list, and he said to me that he didn't know and he didn't care what Gotti did with Foxy's, and he didn't know and he didn't care what Funzy did. Everybody had their own list, but I hadn't seen those guys in a couple of weeks. I was busy. In the meantime, I kept my stash because I had money. I didn't have to sell my stuff. And I saw the price of gold, just going up and down. I figured the longer I kept this stuff, the better. I guess it was maybe a couple of months later, I had made a couple of court appearances. I knew I was going to go to jail in the summer, and this was maybe like in the spring. So I gave Cataldo the list. I was really slow on selling. And then he gave the list to somebody. He brought the guy over and he inspected the watches. But what I had done is I pulled out like 1,000 high dollar gold watches out of the 14,000 that I had, and I stashed them. Of course, I had, some very, very expensive watches at that time were 1,000, 2,000 a watch. Today, they'd be 20,000. They were Audemars, they were Piagets. These are high quality watches. In the meantime, Tommy made a big deal out of us not asking him to go. He went and told Paulie Vario. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I know Vario had to go meet with Gotti about it because, Tommy said it was his right. I had told him about it, but he was doing drugs at the time. And earlier, he got real paranoid and real jealous because I did 1 or 2 scores with Foxy. We robbed a couple of diamond dealers, but we didn't need 3 or 4 people. It was just Foxy and I. And we had information of diamond dealers carrying diamonds around New York City. Eventually, Gotti got all upset over the fact that he had to sit down over it. Then maybe like a month passed, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and Cataldo said, Mike Corio wants to see you. The attorney, the guy who was also Gotti's attorney, he had said that Lloyd's of London, the insurance company, had contacted him and said that they would pay a lot of money for the watches back. But, Foxy took about 50 or 60,000. I think Funzy got about the same amount from his fence, the guy who bought his watches. And I don't know what Charlie did, but when Cataldo told me that, I go, they would pay 60,000. Well, little did we know, but it was Willie Boy Johnson who gave the authorities information about the heist. But I still had a bunch of my stuff stashed. So finally, one day I said to Cataldo, okay, you got the list. See how much you can get. I'm not taking no 50 or 60,000. So maybe a couple of days went by and he said to me, I'll give you 90,000. Well, I didn't tell anybody but Foxy. I go, you know what? I gave Cataldo a list and I kept 1,000 watches, good ones, and I'm going to get 90,000. You didn't tell me what John gave you, but he didn't give you no 90,000. No. He said, I took whatever he gave me. I didn't question him. Okay. So then the day comes when I decide to give Cataldo all the watches, and the buyer came, looked at him. Guy comes with the money, gives me the 90,000. I give Cataldo 5,000, a couple of expensive watches, right? Well, the bottom line was Cataldo kept the list. He went back without telling me and met with Gotti. And Gotti had the list. They said they weren't going to share the information. But Gotti ripped off Foxy, and I don't know. I think Funzy got less money, but nobody got more than 50 or 55,000. I got 90.
90.
Well, then about a few months later, Cataldo asked me. He said, "What'd you do with the Rado watches?" I go, "How'd you know I had?" He said, "You had over 1,000 Rados. There was only 100 of them there." I said, "I stashed them." "Why'd you do that? I thought you were going to sell it." "I didn't matter. You got the guy who was paying me the 90,000, which I know you made a few bucks on that, and I gave you more." He's, "What'd you do with him?" I said, "I stashed him." So then I figured it out. Gotti and Cataldo knew exactly what their load was worth. So Mike Corio came back and he said, "You know what? You got ripped off." I go, "Why?" "Because they would have paid 300,000 for the merchandise if you gave it back to them."
Damn,
Which
man.
was like, that would be 50% more than Foxy got. He only got 50,000 from Gotti. If we gave it back to the insurance company, we would have got 75,000 each. But I had dipped into my own, my own end of the score, and I stashed those watches. So I go to jail in July of that year, and the watches are stashed in my wife's grandfather's house. I come back in 75, and the price of gold doubled. Now, all these gold watches I got that I was getting, I could have got maybe say $100 then. I was getting $600 a watch. I had 1,000 Rado watches, which is very expensive. But I didn't tell Cataldo. I never told him. I never told Foxy. Foxy was dead by that time. But Tommy was very jealous over it. And he had done other things. He was jealous. He was sniffing cocaine. He was so jealous of me that I was smarter. I had bought a couple of buildings with the money I had from the drugs. This guy never saved a dollar. He was sniffing cocaine, gambling, Tommy. And then, he was very jealous of Foxy and I. Now, remember, I go to jail in 74, and by Christmas, he kills Foxy. In January of 75, he's in Lewisburg. He's going through there to be transported to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary with Jimmy. And I told him that I stashed a bunch of the watches. And he goes, "Yeah, it was supposed to be my score, And of course, he went off to Atlanta. And then I did get to see him 6 months later in the new Federal Correction Holding Facility in Manhattan. And I talked a little bit about the watches. I never told him how many I had. I didn't tell him the whole story.
Yeah.
He was really jealous that, that I did that score with Foxy and I brought in Funzy. Because Funzy eventually became a made guy, but he was 6'6" and he was a target. All the feds knew him as a hijacker. So we had to protect him when we did the score. And of course, they all died. And I kept some of those watches. And today, those watches are probably 3, 4, 5,000 each watch. A 14 karat gold Rado watch is a lot of money. So that was basically the story with the watch robbery. The guy who gave me information had said that when the authorities showed up, because customs called security in JFK Airport, and they said there's a lock on the door that doesn't belong there. And by that time, the people inside got loose, and they were banging on the inside of the door. And so they had to call somebody with a acetylene torch, burn the lock to go in. But that was one of the great scores, that I made. Is probably worth millions of dollars. And of course, that's 50 years ago already, comes February. But that's the story of one of the times that I knew how jealous Tommy was. And of course, I didn't have the conversation with Gotti about Tommy, but I knew he hated him because I think he found out his brother had turned informant.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I think Tommy Agro, another Gambino guy, had killed the brother. And eventually,
that's what I said.
Yeah, eventually, I don't know what happened to Tommy exactly, how he got killed, but I know Gotti hated him.
Yeah, I mean, there was a theory that Gotti was even the one that, these guys snagged up Tommy and then brought him to a meeting place, and then Gotti pulled the trigger.
Right.
But who knows, man? There's so many theories out there.
Yeah, a lot of different stories. It was interesting though, because over the years, I think about, the price of gold I think it had gone up to 80, 90, or $100. Oh my God. The price of gold is almost 2,000 an ounce today. So every one of those watches is thousands of dollars.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
went up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is very interesting to hear the whole story. I mean, you just kept going with it. I mean, it's very, very detailed. There's a lot of characters involved with
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
overall, that's what we were getting at, is that Tommy was jealous of some things that you had going on at
Right.
one
Right.
time,
And I
so
had, made sure that I gave Jackie Donnelly watches for him and, his wife, Joanne. They loved watches, by the way. And for I think it was his uncle, his cousin, somebody who had that funeral parlor out there. I think I remember the name of it after 50 years. I think it was called J. Clements
mhm. Yeah.
Kearns. It sticks in my mind after 50 years. J. Clement Kearns funeral home, and I always thought it was a funny thing that, Jackie helped us do that score. And of course, he was excited that I was going to go in there and actually stick up the whole damn terminal, because in those days, nobody did that kind of stuff.
No.
It was like considered suicide. And Gene Gotti goes, man, you guys are going to get killed. That's what he said.
Was I mean, wasn't Tommy as well jealous about a fur heist you did?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was jealous of the first fur heist we did with, Red and Foxy and I. And then eventually, he went with Foxy and talked him into going in there and heisting the building where they were finishing the furs, like I did with the watches. He just copied my idea. He wasn't a very creative guy. I mean, I was creative. It was like every robbery I was doing was like writing a script for a film. This is the step you do here, and this is what you do there. And Foxy liked it. He used to go, Bots, you should be out in Hollywood. 50 years ago. Little did he know I was going to wind up out there.
Yeah, he was seeing the future.
Yeah. Yes, that's an interesting story. And even in the book, I didn't give all that detail. This is
No.
the real detail of the S&H Pomerantz watch robbery.
Yeah, well, that I suppose kind of wraps it up. But I mean, if anybody wants to check out Sal's, he was in the Netflix documentary. That was pretty cool, man. That Get Gotti, that was interesting, man. They brought up. I know they even had a picture of Tommy in there, Tommy Desimone, when you were talking about him a little bit briefly. But it was good. So if anybody hasn't seen it, please check it out, because that's good, man. They did pretty good and really
I
professional.
was disappointed. They interviewed me for 8 hours. I gave them great information.
8 hours.
Okay. And as I told Bubbles, who's going to start to think about getting the money to have a very famous writer, I won't say who he is now, write us a treatment or a script. I told Bubbles, I said, I gave those people, it was raw TV. And I said, I gave them information. I gave them, what they did do is I told them about the trial while I was being held in Brooklyn Federal Court downstairs in the basement, how the limousines backed up. And I saw the jurors. So they recreated that scene, but they never once recreated one of the most important things.
Which one?
In John Gotti's life.
What was it?
Which was the meeting with Roy Cohen, the famous attorney,
yeah,
who was really Trump's attorney, by the way, years later.
Yeah.
And I was at that meeting, and the fix was in on the McBratney murder. And so they didn't use that info. All they were interested in, I believe, was depicting how New York City's organized crime bureau and the FBI was fighting over Gotti at the end.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell the stories. And the most important character, I think, in all the history of New York Mafia, they never brought up stories about him, which was Angelo Ruggiero, because single-handedly, we're going to work on this movie. Angelo really was the guy who took down the whole New York Mafia.
Yeah.
So they were interested in Gotti, you know. And I mean, Gotti hated Angelo at the end when he died of cancer. He didn't even go to his funeral. So we've got work to do. In a historical sense, I'm really motivated to tell the story exactly what happened and who caused the entire mob to implode from within.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with documentaries, they seem to do that, whatever storyline they want to follow. I mean, they interviewed the subjects like you did 8 hours. That's insane. But
yeah,
I
they
mean,
used about 4 minutes.
the 8 hours.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what, me and you, we got our show we do, and then we could recreate these stories. But on top of that, too, we're trying to get we're now working on the Mafia Row project. So anybody, that's not familiar with it, where Sal was in Lewisburg prison, I believe in 1974, right?
Right.
Right, yeah, and with all these mafia guys from different families and stuff, and we're gonna try to make try to make the movie happen, come to light, and Sal can talk about the history about each one of these guys, and we'll go into making episodes about maybe 2 of these guys a week, give a little background and who they were and how they got to that prison.
Yep, that's the story of Jealous Tommy, and eventually, he was like a child, by the way. There was times when I looked at him like, when you're a kid, 10, 12, 13 years old, you're playing ball somewhere on a ball field, and you get mad, and you go, "Oh, I'm taking my ball and my bat, and I'm going home." He was pretty childish in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. If you guys want to get another story, we're going to go on our Patreon now, so please subscribe over there. We're going to go follow up on there. But thank you, everyone, for watching. That wraps up today's story about Tommy Desimone getting jealous of Sal. Check out our previous video we did about Tommy Desimone. It's at 70,000 views. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this video. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Also, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to get more videos like this. Also, if you want to get an exclusive story about Sal and Tommy Desimone, please go over and subscribe to our Patreon channel. If you want to support Sal and I, these items can be found in the video description. The first one is Sal's autographed book, The Sinatra Club. The second one is the Sinatra Club playing cards. These cards were played with by Sal and many other mobsters in the Sinatra Club. We also have 2 ticket events that Sal was a part of. The first one is Dinner with a Mobster, which is autographed, and the last one is the Sinatra Club movie ticket. This is autographed as well, and this was a ticket that they had at the movie premiere. Thank you again for everyone for watching and supporting us. We appreciate all the good comments, the likes, and the subscribes we've been getting. Our channel has really been growing, so we just wanted to say thank you. Please stay tuned because we're going to have a lot more good content coming to you.